Hi, so I'm going to talk about Darren, the person I interviewed for the cultural plunge. He is a African American male in his mid-20s. He belongs to the Pentecostal church group, and I have never really experienced something like that before. I mean, I've heard about Pentecostal churches, the main thing, speaking in tongues, and that was always crazy to me. And coming from just, traditional Christian Baptist church background, you know, um, church hymns, nothing crazy. Not saying that's crazy, but nothing that intense goes on at the churches that I've always attended. So being able to go with Darren and experience something like that was nothing that I've never experienced before. And at times, I was really shocked, and there was times I didn't really know what to do. I just kind of stood there and, just observed and just tried to allow myself to be as open as possible to everything that was going on around me. There was times where, the pastor would start speaking in tongues. People beside me would start speaking in tongues. Then at other points of the church service, there'd be people running around. And I'd always heard about people like falling out on the floor and like getting like really worked up and falling on the floor, and they'd have blankets there to cover them up so they wouldn't be exposed to anybody there. That didn't happen, but it was a really different experience for me. And I just had to allow myself to just be really open, non-judgmental, and at times I was clapping along and I was getting into it also. It was definitely a different experience. But one thing about this going to church with Darren is that a traditional, like my church service that I would go to, would probably last about an hour, maybe if the pastor got really into it, maybe an hour and a half. But when I attended church with Darren, I was there for 3.5 hours, and that was something that I'd never, heard of. I was like, 3.5 hours? Like, that was, that's a long time. And the whole entire time, you were never sitting down. You were always moving, always, singing, dancing, just getting into it. And there was never really a time where you would sit down and just read straight from the Bible and just, it was always active. So that was pretty cool. When I sat down with Darren and I talked to him about the different questions that we were required to ask, I asked him how important was this membership to him. And he said that he really didn't feel like it was a membership really, but just it was a faith. It didn't matter what church he went to. It just, faith's important to him. Doing right by God is important to him, not necessarily the membership. Because it doesn't really matter which church you go to, as long as you're doing right by God. I mean, you can have church with a few of your friends at your house, It doesn't have to be actually going to a specific church or, whatever. So he just said, just doing right by God, keeping his faith. That's the most important thing to him. So when I asked him about like a positive dimension of belonging to, I guess, a Pentecostal background, he said just being around just positive energy, positive people, being around other Christians. When you're around other Christians and around other, church-going members, you tend to stick on the right path. And I've noticed that myself. You pretty much stay on the right path like you're supposed to. And when you start dwindling away from those kinds of people and you get around more negative people and stuff, it kind of does take you off the path that God would want you to be on. So I definitely understand that. When I asked him about a less desirable or a negative aspect of this group, he would say gossip, which that's everywhere. That's at work, that's at school. But you hear about it a lot in the church. You really do. There's always going to be people trying to be the more Christian one, or somebody trying to be on the pastor's good side, or trying, I've seen it in my church, that's just, it's everywhere, unfortunately. Then I asked him, how does belonging to this group, or being Pentecostal, how does this affect your social life? And at first, he said it doesn't really affect his social life, because he said, not many people know that he belongs to the Pentecostal church. And I said, well, do you think that maybe you can improve your social life as far as being more positive and just, had a more positive effect on it? And he said, yeah, if you do surround yourself with more positive church-going people, it can be beneficial, I guess, to your social life. And when you, like going to different events that your church holds, that's improving your social life, I said, did it affect your career any? He said no. As far as housing or geographical location, he said the only thing that he can really think of is find a church in his area. He said, the churches that he feels really comfortable in would be like an hour and a half away. So he hasn't really found any that's around him that he feels really comfortable in. So that can kind of be an issue. When I asked about other issues, he couldn't really think of anything. I asked him, what would he like a human service professional to know about, considering, this group? He just said the most important thing is to keep an open mind. Don't be judgmental. I even had to say that to myself, because I had heard things, different stereotypes about being Pentecostal. I had never went to anything like this before, so I was going in new, fresh. I had no idea. So I think that would be really important for a human service professional, to just be open-minded, try not to be judgmental or biased. Some different stereotypes of the group, and like comparing it to my experience, like the snakes. I've heard about like the handling of snakes before. They don't do that. It's actually, they have not practiced, since 1910. They don't do that anymore. Also, when people speak in tongues, they don't go into a trance. They're actually very aware of what they're doing, and they can actually go in and out of speaking in tongues. I've seen some of the members do that. My knowledge and stuff gained, I mean, I wouldn't really say knowledge, but he did talk to me about the different types of like speaking in tongues, which I thought was really interesting. He said there's the ones that have one-on-one conversations with God personally. There's the ones that they're having the one-on-one, but they can translate what the other person's saying. And I thought that was pretty cool. The person I interviewed, Darren, he actually spoke in tongues quite a few times. And each time, I was kind of taken aback, because I was like, that's crazy, That's really interesting. And they become very emotional and really involved in it. And it was a really cool experience. I would definitely go in, for sure. I would definitely go in again. It was just definitely different. But I would say my biggest takeaway from this experience is to be open-minded. I think a lot of people, they hear things, but they've never actually experienced it themselves. They just hear, what other people say, and they just go along with it. But I think everybody should take the time to like visit a Pentecostal church. I think it's really interesting. But yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. Definitely would do it again.